Hello. When I was a kid, like most children, age 5, 6, 7, and like most mothers, my mother read a lot of books to me. And it's something that I found very comforting at the time. And I remember at the time we had a tape deck that we had laying around the house, similar to this, that I played with a lot. And one day I had the idea of recording my mother reading storybooks as she read it to me. And I have memories of listening to those recordings when she wasn't around. I was sort of a part-time latchkey kid. My school got out probably 2 o'clock and she got home at 5. So I had a couple hours where I was at home. There were certainly people in the building, an apartment building where I lived, that were around in case something went wrong, but I spent a lot of time on my own. And I have memories of listening to my mother's tapes, or of the tapes of my mother's reading Goldilocks and Three Little Pigs and whatnot. So now that I'm a parent myself, I've found that it's been really enjoyable reading to my daughter, as well as my son, reading some stories. And I thought, it'd be a really good idea, perhaps it would be a good idea, to record stories to them. So this video is kind of sharing how I go about doing that. So my setup consists of one of these voice recorders. This is a nicer one, but you could probably get away with one that's a lot cheaper. I have it sitting on one of these stands, $13. So that way I can get my voice close to the input, and I simply record the story that I want to record for my daughter. The example that I'm doing today is Country Schoolhouse. It's a book that I've read for her many times. So what I do is I read the text, and sentence by sentence, as you normally would, but whenever I mess up a sentence, I just read the sentence all over again. So, sometimes I can make it through a whole page reading it all correctly. Sometimes I have to read the same sentence 3 or 4 times. Then I go back and I have to do an edit. So the software that I use to edit is called Reaper, which right now it's fairly new for me, but I found it really easy to use. I've also had some experience with Audacity, as well as on Linux. I have used Ardour before. But I found Reaper to be really easy to use. I'm a valuation license, so the first 60 days are free. I believe that after that, for non-commercial use, it's $50, which so far the software seems to be well worth that. Well, let's start by importing the track that I recorded. So I simply just drag from a file or into program. So now I have my recording. Country Schoolhouse, read by your papa. My grandpa, the professor, walks me to school every day. So that's what we have there. Now I found that there's a couple of key bindings that I needed or settings that I needed to really streamline all of this. I think there's really only 3 that I needed to change. One of them is to do automatically scroll view, continuous scrolling. This is the one that I needed to turn on. So by default, my grandpa, the professor, walks me to school every day. Get to the end of he must be the smartest man in the world. I can ask him any question, and he always knows the answer. I just find that makes it difficult. Grandpa says it's thanks to the country school so then it pops he went to. So instead, I do continuous scrolling, which is this. Who has a boy? And I never get tired of hearing him tell this. It will do something fairly obvious. I never get tired of hearing him tell his story. All right, so that's one thing that I needed to change. Another option that I changed, 2 other options. I go to Preferences, Keyboard Multi-Touch, under General, Assign Keyboard Shortcuts. So then I look for pause. So what I did is I changed the key binding for the space bar. By default, what happens when you hit the space, it'll play, and then you hit space again, the scroll will go back to where you started. But I didn't want that. I wanted to just stop where I left off. So the shortcut that I changed here is the pause, transport pause button. Though I remember it being play, stop, one of these 3. It doesn't, either way, what you want is to be able to have the space bar not reset the cursor back to where you started. That's one thing. The other one is whenever I found a piece of text or a piece of recording that I wanted to get rid of, what I want to do is automate this remove contents of selection, removing later items. So it removes it and then scrolls everything or pulls everything in. But I didn't want to have to right click every time. So I created a key binding for that. So remove later items is the keyword. So I go into Options, Preferences. Again, assign keyboard shortcuts. Here I say remove later. Okay. And in this case, I added the Control X key binding. Of course, you use whatever you want. And I believe that actually steps on one of the existing key bindings. Right, so once I have that set up, I am ready to go. So I go to the beginning with the home key, and so I hit spacebar. Country Schoolhouse, red. Right, so in this case, I had a little bit of a pause here at the beginning. I pressed record, and I wasn't 100% ready to just start, take a breath, whatever. So what I do is I record, another option that I needed to change here is I want to turn off enable snapping. Okay, so now I can do, because by default, or really this program is intended for doing music where you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, bars of music. I'm not following a particular tempo, so I want to be able to just select, Control X, go to the beginning. So now I have cut off the dead space at the beginning. Right,
Country
so
Schoolhouse, read by your papa.
So
my grandpa.
One thing here is that, recording in a real time, while it might be engaging to your child, if you're just sitting there alone on your computer, not really the most interesting thing to do. So go down here and I crank this up to about 1.5. 1.6 is what I did last time I did it. So that now...
Country Schoolhouse, read by your papa. Okay. My grandpa, the professor, walks me to school every day. He must be the smartest man in the world.
So at this point, I just kind of read or listen through it until I find a mistake.
In the world. I can ask him any question, and he always knows the answer. Grandpa says it's thanks to the country school he went to as a boy. I never get tired of hearing him tell this. I never get tired of hearing...
Right, so here we see that I messed up. So here I had said...
I never get tired of hearing him tell this. I never get tired of hearing...
Right, so I just simply reread it. So then I select, do that, X, go back to the beginning.
Went to as a boy. I never get tired of hearing him tell his story.
Oh, looks like I screwed up more than once. Okay.
As a boy. I never get tired of hearing him tell his story.
Now, one thing that I found important here is that I always kind of scroll back to a portion of before so that I ensure that the continuity of everything is correct. I don't want to accidentally remove a piece of the text that actually needs to be there. So, also another thing that you can do is scroll down here. This is the control and mouse wheel that I just used to adjust that. So let's continue here.
Tired of hearing him tell his story.
Right, so here I turn the page. So that's kind of a good indicator for your child that the page needs to be turned. But I found that Lydia actually doesn't really need that. She knows how the story goes. I've already read it to her a number of times. So my general practice is to remove that. So Control X and go back to before.
In 1940, when I was a little boy, I went to a small country school. There were only 3 rooms. First and second grades were in one room. Third and fourth and fifth. First and second grades were in one room.
Yep, so there I messed up again. And you also kind of notice that the patterns of the waveforms are kind of consistent, or they're similar.
First and second grades were in one room. Third and fourth and fifth. First and second grades were in one.
Right, so there I messed up. So I simply do that. Go back to the beginning.
3 rooms. First and second grades were in one room. Third, fourth, and fifth in another. And sixth, seventh, and eighth in the last.
Okay, another page turn. X.
Most of the kids in school, no matter how young, had to work a job. Their families needed them. Joseph Casey and his sister Amelia. Their families needed them. Joseph Casey and his sister.
Right. Here again, I messed up. X.
Joseph Casey and... Suddenly, I realized something. Grandpa! Katie's Granny's name, I said. Grandpa laughed. Yes, she's your Granny. Yes, she's your Granny. The girl I married years... Yes, she's your Granny. Yes, she's your Granny. The girl I married... Grandpa laughed. Yes, she's your Granny. The girl I married years and years later. But that's another story.
Well, now that I've finished doing the editing, I save my project. Here. And then I export, render, Country Schoolhouse into a rendered folder. Happens pretty quickly. Audacity and Ardour are both rather slower than this. Close. Oh, one thing that I always manage to forget is you have to change the playback speed back to 1, otherwise you will sound like Mickey Mouse, or chipmunks rather. So save project again, and I render again, render, and overwrite. All right. So at this point I'm basically done, but there's an additional step that I take. So an additional step that I take is I go into a program called Auphonic, which is completely web-based. And if you don't do a lot of this, it's free for 2 hours of optimization per month. And what it does is it does loudness leveling for you, and it also does a fair amount of noise reduction. So I do new production. I upload my file. which is going to be there. To storybooks, rendered, and that. And all the things here are pretty self-explanatory. This is the one that's not on by default. I turned that on. I'm going to save first, and that's what triggers the upload. So then you wait for a while. All right, now it's finished uploading. And so then I go to my production that I've created, edit page. Now I do start production. And now it's done with its work, and we simply will then do a download. All right, now by way of comparison, I will bring the new one in. So things look kind of similar, except for on the bottom here, you see that the peaks are more equalized. It does some amount of compression. It's not like music where everything is completely flat across the top, but still. And that is the final result.